Many readers, when encountering the final pages of Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, feel drawn to ask the question, why don't they run? So much so, when you type Kazuo Ishiguro's name into YouTube, the very first video that pops up is an interview with him addressing this common question. Ishiguro notes his interest in how people do not often rebel against oppressive regimes outside the realm of literature and film. I would argue even further that the reason we do not see Kathy, Tommy, or Ruth rebel in Never Let Me Go is because of how effectively trauma erodes one's sense of identity and belonging in the world. An important distinction, however, is that this erosion of the psyche is not defeat. It's a remarkable protective barrier between the trauma and the self, allowing the individual to continue to function in their daily life. Trauma is a nuanced, universal impact of humanity that typically goes overlooked due to its complexity, variation, and stigmatized nature. To some degree, we have all experienced and been impacted by trauma, and this universality allows many of us to empathize on a interpersonal level. However, empathy isn't always enough. In Never Let Me Go, Ishiguro goes beyond contemplation of what makes us human to depict the dangers of losing our humanity. Even up against trauma's extensive impacts, it is the power of storytelling which empowers Kathy to create a lasting archival narrative that implores its audience to take an active role in evaluating the dangers of a society that forgets its humanity. Before delving into the intentions of Kathy's storytelling, we need to understand the structure of Never Let Me Go, specifically the impact of its format and genre. At first glance, Never Let Me Go meets a majority of the criteria of a memoir. It's a compelling, subjective, and autobiographical account of Kathy's personal memories, driven by themes of identity, loss, and friendship. Its only departure? It's actually speculative fiction. Blending the real and the unreal, Ishiguro crafts a personal narrative that can both comment and reflect on the dangers of unregulated technological innovation, human nature, and the fundamental limitations of existence. These are massive themes that require nuance and compassion in how we tackle them. And this is why speculative memoir is the right approach. Keith McDonald's 2007 article in Life Writing and Science Fiction, Days of Past Futures, analyzes how the departure from traditional memoir allows Kathy's story to avoid being scrutinized for its authenticity and veracity. This is of particular importance to her storytelling because we see Kathy is actively still processing her traumatic life experience, as seen in her nonlinearity, self questioning, and meta referencing, all of which put the reader in a position to be an active participant in her story. The most important aspect of both employing and subverting genre through speculative memoir in Never Let Me Go is its ability to push the boundaries of its readers, engaging them in a relationship that challenges their ability to pick apart the narrative, calling into question how we do and don't engage with these multitudinal themes of human nature in our daily lives. I'd like you to consider your experience as an involved party in Kathy's narrative and how it made you feel. Were you empathetic, outraged, uncomfortable, pitiful? And why that might be. We will return to this later in the video. For now, let's turn to look deeper into Kathy's intrapersonal process. In the novel, we see Kathy slowly deconstruct the illusion of normalcy she has spent her entire life building an identity around. She experiences feelings of shame, understanding that she and her friends are considered less human by people like Madame just because their existence was created in vitro. Later in the story, though emotionally stifled, Kathy struggles with grief in her reconnection with Ruth and Tommy and reflects on their youth, knowing death is imminent and inevitable. Consider after the visit to Madame, when Kathy asked Tommy if his emotional outbursts were because he always knew the darkness and depravity of their existence. At first, he outright denies it and tells Kathy it was just him being an idiot. But after a beat, he says, "That's a funny idea. Maybe I did know, somewhere deep down, something the rest of you didn't." He too acknowledges that perhaps his body knew something his mind didn't about the unjust life he and his friends were subjected to. We see still that this deconstruction is ongoing, and rightfully so. The emotions and feelings of trauma are multidimensional. Yet, amongst Kathy's pain and devotion, she drives around the English countryside, never looking for, but seeing Hailsham wherever she goes. This is an experience I would best describe as harath, a Welsh word that means longing for a place that no longer exists. In the processing of trauma, there's room for both nostalgia, grief, and betrayal. Titus Levy argues in his article in the Journal of Human Rights that as much as the book characters idealize Hailsham or defend its methods and motivations, in the end, Kathy's narrative functions as a form of protest against a system that curtails personal freedoms in favor of the exploitative demands of society. Outright, the reader's expectation for someone to individually rebel against an oppressive societal regime when they are just starting to process that 31 years may be the only time they get to have on this earth is incomprehensible. However, as Levi defends, many readers overlook the fact that Kathy's narrative stands alone as a rebellion in itself, one that they are actively called to be witnesses to. Considering the role of storytelling plays in resistance to oppression, I want you now to recall your emotional experience as a reader and why you may have felt that way. In a conversation I had about the novel with a classmate, he noted that he felt overwhelmed with hopelessness because the story ends with Kathy presumably beginning the donor process and meeting her bleak end. I challenged him to resist this fatalist perspective, to consider what Ishiguro may be asking us as readers to do beyond falling captive to the grips of defeatist nihilism. Anne Whitehead addresses this with great depth in Writing with Care, noting how when society functions on empathy, it is then inherently prone to exclusion and ethnocentrism. This begs the question, what can we do? I would argue that we can go beyond passive empathy to engage actively, engage with the archive of memories Kathy has poignantly crafted, to become, as Whitehead puts it, agitated, to interrogate the complexities of modern society, to pass down the stories so the history cannot be forgotten, to hold on instead of let go. The final lines of Never Let Me Go paints a devastatingly beautiful picture of said archive. I was thinking about the rubbish, the flapping plastic in the branches, the shoreline of odd stuff caught along the fences, and I half closed my eyes and imagined this was the spot where everything I'd ever lost since my childhood has washed up. Throughout the novel, rubbish is frequently used to diminish their identity as clones. And in these final lines, Kathy flips the narrative on its head, reclaiming rubbish in a staunch manner, finally allowing herself to get as close to unstifled emotional release as she feels safe to, leaving that spark for us to ignite. Because even if Kathy can't escape, her story does. It's been 20 years since the publication of Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, and the imperative lessons of Kathy's narrative feel more paramount than ever. We are living in a time that is surrounded by narratives that don't look too dissimilar from Kathy's. From the ongoing genocide of innocent Palestinian people in Gaza to horrific accounts of mass deportations, everywhere we look is evidence of society's disregard for humanity. And many people still choose to look away or exert passive empathy on account that they are not yet directly impacted by these injustices. Ishiguro asks us not to look away, but to amplify these stories. So the oral archive of the stories outlasts those of us here and now. Never Let Me Go haunts you long after the cover has been closed and it's found its way back to the bookshelf. Kathy's reluctance to die without her story being heard is a testament to her resistance to victimization. She knows that in time, all things are lost, but if we hold on and never let go, perhaps our humanity wasn't in vain.